G'day and welcome to Queensland Farmer. We're back from North Queensland where we were up there in Charters Towers and we experienced Cyclone Kirrily. Wasn't a huge event. I've been through a few cyclones and it was pretty mild compared to what I've been through before, but still we prepared pretty well for it and there weren't really any issues. We've made it back onto the farm and it's just wet. It's been wet since we went away and it's been wet since we came back, and it's getting pretty sloshy around the paddock, so it's one of the reasons you haven't really seen any videos. I don't really like to drive out in the paddocks when it's wet. It just tends to just destroy some of the good work that you've done. However, today I've come down just to look at one of the bigger dams that we've got. It's flowing over nicely and nice and calm through those rocks that we've put into place, which is all part of the plan. And for those bigger events that we have had recently, where this overflow gets a bit crazy, the water comes up too high too quickly, it vents onto the other side, and we'll have a look at that today. Got a few things to do over there, but some of that test area where I had the bird seed, some of that has worked and some of it hasn't worked. The stuff that has worked has been outstanding. The stuff that hasn't worked, it's really because it's been inundated with water, but like I say, we'll go and check that out in a minute. Now, the heat that we've had in Queensland has just been incredible. Even for summer, it's been a very humid and very wet area. So once again, a big shout out to the Bureau of Meteorology for not getting it right this year. I'm still surprised that they said it was going to be a dry summer and it's been extremely wet. You can probably hear the water underfoot, and this isn't a particular wet area, but it's just like that everywhere. Like many other farmers, we destocked our cattle for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons was that they had got to that age where we weren't really going to make any more money out of them if we had kept them any longer. They sort of got to that 450 kilo stage. And the other reason was that it was going to be dry, and I thought, well, look, let's get rid of them now before the prices are likely to go down. The prices have gone up a little bit since we sold them, but it's, in the scheme of things, it's probably negligible. But it just shows that I really should have been looking at what's going on in the wildlife out here on the farm to understand whether or not there's going to be rain or not. I took some photos, which I will show in a second, of what the termites were doing, and they were building, and that's usually a good sign that it's just going to be wet. And sure enough, they got it right. That's a sort of a longer term forecast. I have a daily forecast, and I didn't believe this before I had cattle, but cattle seem to know when it is going to rain. They typically are laying down before it rains so they can stand up when it is raining. And I've seen that over and over again. It might sound like one of those tales that farmers might tell, but it certainly has worked fairly consistently, and certainly my observation. So along with the heat and the wet, everything is growing. It's crazy. It's certainly something I'm not complaining about. I know I spent a couple of hours just mowing the lawn yesterday, and in an area that I'd mowed the day before that, just right around where the front door was, in 2 days it's grown probably 35 or 40 mils. So quite incredible how much the grass can grow when it's got heat, it's got wet. So that's the price you pay. A bit of an observation earlier today was that not only is the grass growing, but some of those weeds, that I might have missed, some of the GRT, giant rat's tail, are certainly coming up. But that's fine. It's part of the cycle that we address those when we find them. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but once we get on top of the weeds, they'll be a lot easier to maintain and manage over a longer term. Also want to let you know that once things do dry out a bit, those areas regarding the leaky weirs, well, I've got some plans to upgrade one of the leaky weirs that I've done previously based on a bit of feedback that I got off YouTube, so thank you for those people. I'm going to throw a bit of rock in between where the two weirs are, with the view of once that larger weir that I've done starts to silt up, and it certainly is already silting up, there's a bit of dirt caught up on there and other sediments. The plan there is I'm going to put some rock between it and the smaller leaky weir behind it. I believe what will happen, based on this advice that I did receive, is that eventually it'll get a bit of a rapid there, and because it's a fairly decent catchment in that area, if the water comes through that timber and then digs down the dirt behind that large leaky weir, that's going to be counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve. So again, I'll get in there once it dries out a bit. Right now, driving the tractor into there with rock on the front will just be a nightmare, and that will again undo the things that I really want to get sorted. So let's go for a bit of a tour. Now this is one of our larger dams. A fair bit of it's covered in reeds, but it does go for quite some distance up there. You see where the tank is, that's all dry land, but it's a pretty decent sized dam, and it's certainly at capacity now. And you can see here, if we just have a look through these rocks, you can see that the water is moving through those. Nice and gentle. There's lots of grasses and that sort of thing growing through here. I don't have any issue with that. It's nice to finally see it get established, and what I'm hoping will happen is that grass will sort of head down further down that area and maybe save me buying some rocks. You see there are a couple of sections there where there's a bit of turbidity in the water, the particles of dirt just based on that colour. Well, that's obviously something we don't want to see. I'm not sure what's happened there, but it might have just flowed back from the area that there's no rocks. Anyway, I'm not going to step in through that. I really don't want to make the situation worse. So there's a bit of water laying there, and that's just seeping off out around that corner. But check out the grass here. It's just everywhere. It's great to see. A bit of erosion happening here, so I'm not going to drive the ATV up here. This sodic soil is sticky as, so I'll walk up here and sort of check out how things are going. I'll probably throw a bit of mulch or something over the top of this. Having said that, the grass is certainly establishing itself, and once we do have a good cover, that'll be nice. Just to show you how sticky it sort of gets. It's just a footprint that I just made just by stepping on it. So yeah, that sodic soil is sticky when it's wet and hard as concrete when it's dry. So lovely to see this grass cover up over the dam. Certainly one area where we're not going to have any sort of erosion issues. And this is where we pop out, where I threw in that, this is Sam. She always loves coming out. I think it's the ATV that she loves. Loves coming out for a bit of a drive. So, a few sunflowers. This is the product of the bird seed that we threw out here. You might recall we put a bit of mulch down. It just shows that despite the cattle walking through here and walking all over the seed that we threw out in the mulch, it really hasn't affected it negatively. Some of the viewers, in fact, commented and said they thought it would be good because it would hold water in the holes that their hooves made, and certainly hasn't hurt. Now, just a recap, that was the birdseed mix that we threw out. That idea came from Eric, from changing the soil. And as you can see, it's really established some greenery pretty quickly. Some areas didn't get it, but they've still got the mulch over the top. So that at least means that we're not eroding, which is lovely to see. Now this is bringing the birds and the bees in. They're doing their business. And this is just a nice way to look after the environment and not have any erosion. On the other side, which was closest to the dam, still not too bad. There's a few bare areas here and there, but still, I'm not discouraged by that. I think it's actually turned out pretty well. Okay, so we might just duck over and see where we did the overflow. Again, walking through this nice long grass here. If you haven't seen it already, when we built this fence, it might be a bit difficult to see, but there's a fence through here. That whole area that we slashed before we did the work, there was a fairly decent snake that went across on that video. So if you haven't seen that, go out and check it out. So this is a secondary spillway. Now the idea behind having a secondary spillway is that if the primary spillway gets too full too quickly, and this particular dam has a huge catchment. So when it gets running, if we got a big storm now, it would certainly overflow the primary and it would start overflowing into the secondary to try and get rid of that water. That is the design. The consequence of it though is that where we've planted some of this birdseed, you can see it really hasn't survived. It's just been wet, and it's been wet for weeks. So I was actually chatting with Eric about this. I mean, we're always in communication to see, you know, what other ideas we could try. And he was saying, well, whether or not it's worked or hasn't worked, it means that anything that's died has added organic matter. So that's a win. So I like his philosophy on that sort of thing. You never get it perfect. There's always benefits to the approach. So it's coming up all right. Now, if you just think back to the video that we put out, oh geez, it wouldn't have only been a month ago. This whole area here was completely slashed down to nothing. And look at it now. It's halfway up those posts. So it just keeps raining. Which again, isn't the end of the world. As a good friend of mine used to say, you can make money from mud, but you can't make it from dust. So, yeah. So Gary definitely knew what he was talking about with that saying. You probably see where that white bucket is. At the base of where that white bucket is, there's a 2-inch or 50mm pipe that connects to the other dam. So what we often do is we'll pump from there through to another dam. And normally the water isn't this high, so we can safely have the pump sitting there. It actually sits up on a tyre as it is, so it gives it a fair bit of clearance. And we had that pump sitting in that area just a couple of weeks ago, and we knew a bit of rain was expected, but didn't really think it was going to be that much. And we came down here the next day and we found the pump halfway underwater. So that's a good way to destroy a pump. Certainly not something that we've done before. Might be something we soon do again. But since then, it just keeps raining, which is wonderful.
So high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world and keep the sky on your mind. Flying.
And once again, that's another one of the new fences that we've just done recently. So the grass has grown really, really well in that period of time. Rain and heat, that's all it needs. So yes, plenty of feed to have when you consider we've only got a couple of animals here. Speaking of those couple of animals, we typically leave a couple here out of the ones that we've had. And the reason for that is they're the ones that are calm and that they come to us when we call them. It's a nice way just to bring the animals in. We don't need to have Sam out there working with them. We've done that just a couple of times, and we do it in an emergency if we need to move them in a hurry, but typically we can move the cattle just by calling them, and the ones that are friendly to us move forward and the rest will follow them. You can just see where I've driven the ATV through this area here, sort of flatten the grass a bit. It really is quite long here at present. Anyway, we'll head up the hill and we'll see what our experiment is looking like up there. I mentioned earlier that the cattle sit down when the rain's coming. That way they can rest now and then stand later. Well, I've just come across the cattle over there. Hopefully you can see them in the centre. The two that we've got left are just sitting down there beside the fence. I'll have a rest, and then when it's raining they typically hop up. So that's one way to gauge whether or not we're going to get rain. We're about to check on how that mulch and the seed has been going up on the top of the hill where the cattle had previously walked and damaged and then caused that erosion. This is an area around the farm that we haven't addressed at all. So it shows that naturally it's not fixing itself up. See, the grass is growing beside it, but where there's nothing for that grass to collect to, because either there's no fine sediments that it can get the roots into, or it keeps getting washed away, this is what happens when you leave it. I have plans to go around the whole farm and find any of these little tracks and cover them up with seed and mulch. There will be kilometres and kilometres of them, so we'll get to that, but just not yet. So for comparison, you've seen this wood chip pile before. This is the one that we took some biology out of and put in our test area. And you might recall what it used to look like before. So it gives you an idea of how much this grass has grown. Nice to see a few mushrooms coming up. It seems to be a fairly regular thing. And in stark contrast, compared to that animal track that we looked at just a few moments ago, this area where we put mulch is grassing up nicely. Track's disappearing. These grasses are dropping roots into it. It's expanding all over the place. And what you could see previously was rock, is now we're just getting grass. Now, I'll agree that we've had plenty of rain, which has certainly helped the situation. But even with that rain, you can see that that other test area where we've done nothing hasn't grown any grass. So I conclude that mulching works. Give you an idea of how high this grass is. That's about 40 mil off ground level. So from this experiment area, if you look back towards where that wood chip is, you can barely see it. Not unless I lift the camera way up high on the end of an extension pole. You can see it. So it gives you an idea of how much that grass has grown. The grass is so thick that you can even see where I drove through it before. For instance, this grass was mown 2 days ago. So that's showing about 15 centimetres high from the ground. So it's certainly gone up at least a couple of inches or 50 mils in 2 days. As you can probably hear, here comes another storm. Well, it's about 40 mils of rain and it's still raining, so I'll close this video off here. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what happens when it rains and rains and rains. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.